It was just past midnight when the world inside 2,270 for Willow Creek Drive shattered. The night had been peaceful, a light drizzle outside, the hum of a late-night documentary playing on the living room TV, and the faint scratch of pen on paper as Lena Robinson, a nurse at the local clinic, finished reviewing patient charts. Her husband, Darius, sat reclined nearby, half watching the screen and half dozing. The rhythm of their small house in Eastwood, Georgia, was simple, predictable, and safe, or so they thought. Their daughter, Maya, had just called from her dorm an hour earlier. She'd teased Lena for still working past midnight, laughed at her dad's old Navy habits, and promised to visit that weekend. The call ended with love and laughter. Then silence returned, the kind of silence that usually carried comfort, until the sound of boots broke it apart. "Police! Hands up!" A voice thundered as the front door exploded inward. The crash of wood and metal echoed like gunfire. Lena's pen dropped. Darius jolted upright, instincts firing before thought could catch up. Blinding white light tore through the darkness, flashlights cutting across their living room. Like searchlights in a war zone. For a split second, Darius wasn't in Georgia anymore. He was back in Kandahar, heart pounding, scanning for threats. His body knew before his mind did. Cover, identify, de-escalate. But there were no insurgents here. Just his wife, standing barefoot in her nightgown, trembling. "Please, this is our home," Lena shouted, hands raised, voice cracking with fear. "Down. Get down," barked one of the officers, a tall white man with close-cropped hair and a trembling jaw. His badge read Mitchell. His rifle tracked her movement like prey. Darius stepped forward, palms up. "Officer, my name is Darius Robinson, retired Navy SEAL commander. There are no weapons here. You're in the wrong." The gunshot swallowed his words. The blast hit like thunder in a small room. Lena's body jerked backward, a red bloom spreading across her chest as her reading glasses flew from her face. She crumpled beside the couch, the patient files she'd been holding scattering like fallen leaves. Darius dropped to his knees beside her, pressing his hands hard against the wound. His mind snapped into combat medicine mode. Pressure, airway, breathing, control the bleeding. "Lena, stay with me." His voice was steady, but his eyes burned. "Target neutralized," Officer Mitchell muttered, lowering his weapon slightly. Darius looked up, every muscle in his body screaming to act, but he didn't move. Not yet. He knew better than anyone what happened to black men who reached for anything in front of police. He forced his voice calm. "Officer, she's unarmed. She's my wife. You need to call for a medic now." No one moved. Instead, flashlights swept the room again, beams slicing across the overturned furniture and framed family photos on the wall. The officers shouted commands at one another, chaotic, conflicting, meaningless. Darius grabbed a dish towel from the coffee table, pressing it over Lena's wound. Blood seeped fast, warm, and slit between his fingers. He dialed 911 with his free hand, the phone slipping slightly in his grasp. 911. "What's your emergency?" "This is Commander Darius Robinson," he said, each word clipped and clear. "There has been an officer-involved shooting at 2,270 for Willow Creek Drive. My wife has been shot. I am applying pressure to her chest wound. There are no weapons in this room, 2 mugs, 1 knife on the counter, a towel being used for pressure. I need immediate medical response, sir." "Officers are already on scene. They're obstructing medical care," Darius interrupted, his tone icy calm. "I'm recording this call. Send paramedics now." Behind him, one officer barked, "Hands up where I can see them." "I am maintaining pressure to a wound," Darius replied, not turning his head. "I cannot comply with contradictory commands. My wife is dying." Minutes stretched like hours. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the copper tang of blood. Outside, sirens wailed too far, too slow. Lena's breathing became shallow, her eyes finding Darius's. He spoke softly to her, words she couldn't quite hear, but could feel. "Stay with me, baby. You're going to make it." When the paramedics finally arrived, the officers blocked their entry. That was the moment Darius's composure cracked, not with rage, but with command. "I am asserting medical necessity. You are on record obstructing emergency care," he said, voice deep and commanding. It wasn't a plea. It was an order. The paramedics hesitated only a moment before pushing through. They loaded Lena onto a stretcher, the red of her blood bright against the sterile white sheets. As they carried her out, Dryas looked straight into Officer Mitchell's pale face. Sweat beaded his temple. Fear flickered in his eyes, not of Dryas, but of consequence. Dryas memorized every detail, every tremor, every shadow. Outside, blue and red lights painted the neighborhood in pulsing color. Neighbors peeked from porches, phones raised. The scene looked like a crime drama, except this wasn't fiction. As the ambulance doors slammed shut and sped away, Dryas stood in the driveway barefoot, his hands covered in his wife's blood. The first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, light cutting through the smoke of shattered wood and gunpowder. The silence that followed was worse than the chaos. He looked down at his hands, trembling only now that the adrenaline began to fade. The blood was tacky, drying in the lines of his skin. He took a slow, deliberate breath, the kind seals take before breaching a door. "You broke into a soldier's home," he murmured under his breath, eyes never leaving the splintered doorway. "You have no idea what kind of war you just started." The walls of the emergency room buzzed with fluorescent light as Dryas Robinson sat in the hard plastic chair outside the trauma bay, his hands still stained crimson with Lena's blood. He hadn't moved since they wheeled her in. His fingers were locked together, forearms resting on his thighs, back rigid and eyes fixed on the swinging double doors. Inside, surgeons were fighting for Lena's life. Outside, Dryas was preparing for war. Across the hall, Officer Mitchell stood with two others, his face pale, jaw tight. They kept glancing over, as if hoping Dryas might yell, cry, even fall apart. But he didn't. His military training had carved something cold and quiet into his bones. Emotion would come later. For now, there was only mission. Dryas pulled out his phone with slow, precise movements and opened the voice recorder app. His thumb tapped the screen. The red circle glowed. "Officer Mitchell," he said calmly. "Badge number 2281. I am formally requesting the names and badge numbers of all officers present during the incident at 2270 for Willow Creek Drive." Mitchell's jaw tensed. He didn't answer. Another officer, younger, nervous, muttered, "Badge 3157. Officer King, badge 2903. Officer Denvers," the other added quickly. Dryas turned back to Mitchell. "Your silence is being recorded, Officer Mitchell. Georgia Law 41.3.18 requires identification upon citizen request during any public safety operation." "This is that request." Mitchell took 2 angry steps forward. His hand hovered near his belt. "Listen, you." "Careful," Dryas said, not even flinching. "Your posture suggests attempted intimidation. I'm unarmed. You're on camera. Your hand is on your weapon." The younger officers stepped back slightly, leaving Mitchell exposed in the center of the hallway like a man stripped of cover. Then came the sound of polished shoes on linoleum. A tall man in a pressed uniform approached, captain's bars on his collar. "Mr. Robinson," he said smoothly, extending a hand. "Captain Wallace Gray, I'd like a word in private." Dryas stood. "I'll speak with you. My recorder stays on." "Of course," Gray said, leading him into an alcove just off the waiting room. The captain's face was tight with the kind of forced calm honed in public offices, not battlefields. "There's been a serious mistake," Gray said, lowering his voice. "The warrant was for 2247 Willow Creek. Your house 2274 was not the intended target." Dryas didn't react. "You kicked in the wrong door. We'll cover medical bills," Gray offered. "Repairs, counseling if needed. Chief Langston would like to meet with you at 10 a.m. to make it go away." Dryas interrupted. Gray's mouth twitched. "To make it right." Dryas's stare didn't blink. "Your officers didn't verify the address. One of them shot my wife in her kitchen while she was unarmed and pleading. And you're worried about escalation." The captain held out a hand. "You have my word, Mr. Robinson. The department will make this right." Dryas took it, gripped harder than necessary. "I'll be there. 10 sharp." By the time Dryas returned to the trauma bay, Lena was out of surgery but still critical. The bullet had missed her heart, but grazed a lung and fractured a rib. Her body had lost too much blood. Machines beeped beside her. Nurses moved quietly in and out of the room. He sat beside her bed, took her hand gently in his own, and stared at the slow rise and fall of her chest. Then he whispered, "They picked the wrong house. And the wrong man." Back home just after sunrise, Darius stepped over shards of wood and shattered truss. The front door hung askew on its hinges. Yellow police tape fluttered like cautionary prayer flags in the morning breeze. The living room was chaos, overturned furniture. Lena's glasses crushed near the fridge, the bloodstained dish towel left where EMTs had tossed it. Aside, he moved through the space silently, like clearing a compound. He didn't flinch at the damage. He assessed it, cataloged it, photographed it. In the kitchen, he retrieved a small evidence tag that had slipped under the baseboard. Item 4, unregistered. Firearm, black semi-automatic. Darius stared at it, whispered under his breath, "You shouldn't leave your props behind." He picked up his phone and called someone he hadn't spoken to in 10 years. "Jerome." A pause. Then a gruff voice replied, "Commander Robinson. Been a while. I need you. Tell me when and where." Darius looked around his ruined home, eyes cold. "We meet truth at sunrise. But first, I need to show the world what they did while it's still dark." By 6:30 p.m., Darius Robinson was back in the hospital waiting room, washed up, redressed, and silent. His sweatshirt still bore faint streaks of Lena's blood along the cuffs. He sat unmoving as the news flickered across the mounted TV screen in the corner of the room. The segment started like every other incident report: a crisp anchor, a polished backdrop, a reassuring tone. "Breaking news tonight out of Eastwood, Georgia," the anchor began. "Police say a lawful search warrant execution resulted in a civilian injury." When officers encountered resistance, Darius clenched his jaw. There it was, the lie, the screen. Cut to Police Chief Samantha Langston, standing behind a podium with American and Georgia flags draped behind her like stage props. Her salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, her uniform immaculate. At approximately 12:04 a.m., she stated, "Officers executing a warrant at a suspected narcotics location were met with confusion and unexpected resistance. A civilian was tragically injured in the process." Tragically injured, as if Lena's collapsed lungs and broken ribs were an unfortunate hiccup, not the result of a bullet. From one of Langston's officers. Then the footage began, edited bodycam clips, chopped into staccato bursts of motion and noise. Darius leaned forward. A sliver of their home flashed on screen. The front door shattered. Lena visible for half a second with her arms raised. Then the screen cut away. Cut just before the moment the trigger was pulled. Chief Langston's voice continued over the footage, as if narrating a training video. "As you can see, officers remained composed and professional in a volatile environment." Another lie. Polished, rehearsed, and broadcast into homes like bedtime stories. Across the room, an elderly nurse watching the segment shook her head. "That's not what I heard happened," she muttered, not recognizing the man seated just 10 feet away. Darius didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the screen as the narrative twisted into fiction. Reality redacted in real time. Body. "CM footage confirms appropriate procedure," Langston said, her voice slick with authority. "We regret any injury but stand by our officers." At that exact moment, Darius's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Alana Nguyen, Metro Daily. Don't delete this. I know what they're hiding. Don't speak to internal affairs. Need to talk securely." He stared at the screen for a beat. Then another message dropped. "I have the full body cam footage, and they're already scrubbing the logs." Darius looked up slowly. On the TV, Chief Langston was wrapping up her statement, thanking the community for its patience and support. The broadcast shifted to commentary, legal experts, carefully selected, dissecting body cam footage they'd only been allowed to preview. Darius tuned them out. His eyes weren't on the screen anymore. They were locked on the warpath ahead. 2 hours later, in a dim corner of the hospital cafeteria, Darius met her. Alana Nguyen looked young, but her eyes carried exhaustion deeper than years. A laptop bag hung at her side. Her coat still damp from the rain outside. She scanned the room before sliding into the seat. Across from him, Commander Robinson, she said quietly. "Thank you for meeting me." Darius nodded. "Let's skip the small talk. What do you have?" She opened her laptop. The screen glowed between them like a battlefield flare. "I got this an hour ago," she said. "Straight from someone inside the department. Full body cam from Mitchell. Not the redacted version they showed on TV." She clicked play. There it was, the same flash of tactical light, the sweep of the rifle, Lena's voice. "We're unarmed. Please." Then the gunshot. Lena dropped. And then, for seconds later, the camera turned again toward the counter. Darius's eyes narrowed. There, suddenly, sat a black handgun on the kitchen counter. It hadn't been there before. He didn't blink. "That gun wasn't there," he said, his voice low and filled with something dangerous. "I listed every item on that counter during the 911 call. 2 mugs, 1 towel, 1 cutting board. No weapon." "I know," Alana said. "We pulled the 911 call. Your report is precise, almost surgical. Military training," he muttered. "Details matter. Evidence matters." She flipped to a different window. "The gun," she said, "wasn't registered in any Eastwood database. It's from a private company, Dorn Strategic, out of Alabama, contracted to train high-risk units. They're embedded with your local department under a redevelopment safety initiative." Darius's blood ran cold. "Silas Dorn," he muttered. "I know that name. Ex-Blackwater, war profiteer in a suit." Alana nodded. "They're running a major urban redevelopment push: stadium, condos, new transit corridor. And your street." She pulled up a map. A bold red outline circled several blocks. "You're right in the middle of the clearing zone." Darius stared at the screen. His hand curled slowly into a fist. "They shot my wife," he said, then tried to turn her into a threat to justify it. He looked up. The war in his eyes was no longer cold. "They tried to kill her twice," he said softly. "Once with a bullet, once with a lie. Midnight again, exactly 24 hours after the raid." Darius Robinson stood alone in the doorway of his shattered home, flashlight in one hand, burner phone in the other, the soft hum of cicadas buzzing in the distance. The neighborhood was quiet to quiet. The police tape had been torn down by kids or the wind. The officers hadn't even bothered to secure the perimeter properly. It was sloppy, and that was going to be their first mistake. He stepped inside. Each footfall was soundless SEAL training embedded in every muscle. He wasn't just walking through his home. He was walking through a crime scene, and he was there to process it. The beam of his flashlight swept over the living room, scorched. Marks on the floor from flashbangs, shattered picture frames, Lena's scattered patient notes, still untouched where they fell. Her blood was darker now, congealed in the grout lines of their cream-colored kitchen tiles. Darius paused, took a photo, then another, and another, each angle meticulously framed. He found the shell casing near the base of the refrigerator. No one had collected it. He photographed it, bagged it. The trail led him to the kitchen counter. That's where they claimed the gun was found. The same gun that hadn't been there when he'd described the counter over 911. He dropped to one knee, sweeping the flashlight along the floor. A glint caught his eye, half tucked under the cabinet baseboard. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of tweezers, carefully extracting the evidence tag, item number 004. Black 9mm semi-automatic, unregistered. Read it twice, whispered, "Sloppy work," and photographed it from 4 angles. Just then, his burner buzzed. Text from Alana Nguyen. Serial number matches Dorn Strategic's training stock. Dummy weapon. Never registered. Used for SWAT simulations. Follow-up message. They didn't just plant a gun. They planted a fake gun. From a training inventory. Darius's mouth tightened into a hard line. He didn't respond. He was already moving. Upstairs, the bedroom looked like it had been turned inside out. Drawers dumped, closet doors off hinges. Someone had even torn apart Lena's jewelry box. Her favorite hummingbird pin, the one she wore every Sunday to church, lay on the floor. Beside their overturned dresser, he picked it up, brushed it off, and stared at it for a long moment. Then, like flipping a switch, he was back on mission. He moved room by room, taking photos, bagging fibers, measuring boot prints in the carpet. Every detail time-stamped, every inch mapped. Downstairs again. He opened his laptop on the kitchen table, still stained red with Lena's blood, and began compiling photos, coordinates, time logs, voice memos. He uploaded the body cam footage Alana had sent, synced it with his 911 call, then overlaid a new layer, metadata from a file she'd just sent. The search warrant, creation timestamp, 3:21 a.m. signature timestamp, 3:22 a.m. time of raid entry, 12:03 a.m. 3 hours before the warrant even existed. Darius said aloud, rage simmering low in his chest. He tapped a few more keys and added a final piece, drone footage Alana had obtained from a local activist. It showed Dorn's strategic operatives running training drills on abandoned houses just 2 blocks over from the Robinson home 3 days before the raid. The grid of houses they practiced on formed a clear corridor, leading straight through Willow Creek and right through Darius and Lena's block. They weren't after suspects, he said quietly. They were clearing obstacles. At 3 a.m., Darius encrypted the entire case file, labeled it Truth, Operation Eastwood. He sent a copy to his own cloud server, another to a trusted SEAL buddy in Chicago, and the third to Jerome Watson, the retired civil rights attorney, who'd once taken on an entire state police department. And one. His email was simple. They shot my wife. I have proof it was deliberate. Will you help me make them pay? Watson replied within minutes. Call me at dawn. Don't speak to anyone else. Before logging off, Darius opened one more email from Alana. Breaking, phone records. DA Bristow called Silas Dorn 12 times between 11:40 p.m. and 3:19 a.m. on the night of the raid. Last call ended 2 minutes before the warrant was backdated. He leaned back in the kitchen chair. Around him, the house was a war zone. But on his laptop, a map of corruption was coming into sharp focus. He whispered to himself, "You built your lie like a castle, but you built it on my kitchen floor." Outside, the wind shifted. The rain began again, soft against the windows. Inside, a war veteran sat in the ruins of his life, turning grief into ammunition, and the evidence was only just beginning to burn. The 4th day after the shooting began with the same sterile rhythm as the ones before it, beeping monitors, antiseptic scrubbed air, nurses in soft-soled shoes drifting from room to room. But in Lena Robinson's hospital room, the rhythm changed. Darius had barely slept. He'd been seated at her bedside for hours, holding her hand between his. Her vitals were stable now, still fragile, but stable. And then, her fingers twitched. Darius froze. His heart stopped. "Lena," he whispered, leaning in. Her eyes fluttered open slowly. Those same warm brown eyes he'd fallen in love with more than 2 decades ago, clouded now with pain, but unmistakably her. She blinked, slowly, deliberately. She couldn't speak yet. The breathing tube was still in, but she locked eyes with him and pointed weakly to the dry erase board on the table. Darius placed the board in her lap. She took the marker with trembling hands. Her writing was jagged, uneven, but clear. "Did they say sorry?" Darius exhaled through gritted teeth. "Not yet," he said softly. "But they will." She wrote again. "Our home," he nodded. "Gone. We're staying with Pastor Elijah for now. The community's rallied. People are helping." A soft knock on the door broke the moment. Alana Nguyen stepped inside, holding a warm cup of coffee and her ever-present notebook. Her expression softened when she saw Lena awake. "Mrs. Robinson," she said quietly, approaching the bed. "It's good to see you alert." Lena raised the whiteboard again. "Thank you." Alana smiled, then turned serious. "Marcus," she had begun calling him that now. "I just got word from a DOJ contact. They're watching this case closely. If we can build enough public momentum, they'll launch a full civil rights investigation." Lena's hand moved again. "Tell everyone. Truth matters." Darius looked at Alana. His voice was calm, but filled with steel. "We organize a march, no signs, no shouting, no threats," he added. "Just truth, walking in broad daylight." Alana nodded. "We can do that. I'll coordinate media coverage. We'll livestream it, too." Maya burst into the room a few minutes later, tears streaking down her cheeks as she dropped her backpack and rushed to her mother's bedside. "Mom." Lena smiled weakly and wrote, My beautiful girl. Then Maya turned her laptop toward them. I've been working on something. It was a simple but powerful website. Days since the truth was shot. The home page showed a stark black counter. For days, beneath it, a timeline clean, factual, and irrefutable. 12:03 a.m. Entry without warning. 12:04 a.m. Lena shot. 3:21 a.m. Warrant created. 3:22 a.m. Signature timestamped. 3:24 a.m. Press statement drafted. Each point was sourced, timestamped, cross-verified. No commentary. No outrage. Just facts. We let them write the first version of the story, Maya said. Now we publish the truth. By day 6, word had spread far beyond Eastwood. Teachers, veterans, nurses, pastors, even off-duty officers. People were traveling in from neighboring counties to show up not in anger, but in witness. And on the 7th day, 1 week after Lena was shot in her kitchen, they gathered. Hundreds of people filled the front lawn of St. Matthew AIM Church. Dressed in quiet dignity, nurses wore their scrubs. Veterans wore their medals. Church elders wore their Sunday best. Many carried lead candles, glowing even in the bright morning sun. Others carried nothing but the stillness of their presence. Lena, still weak, insisted on attending. Darius helped her into a wheelchair. Someone had pinned her restored hummingbird brooch to her hospital robe. She looked frail but fierce. Alana's camera crews were in position. The live stream began at 9 a.m. sharp. Darius stepped forward. His voice, low and measured, carried like a prayer. "We do not walk today to shout," he said. "We walk so the world must watch." Then the march began, through the streets of Eastwood, past grocery stores and gas stations. A column of silent witnesses moved forward, step by step. Office workers paused at windows. Store owners came out and removed their hats. Even Eastwood police officers posted at intersections stood back, their faces unreadable. Some lowered their eyes, others simply watched, and above it all, the soft buzz of news helicopters circled like hawks. At the front of the march, Lena's wheelchair moved slowly between her husband and daughter. Behind them, signs were unnecessary. The silence itself became a roar. When they reached City Hall, the crowd gathered on the steps, still without a word. No one spoke. No one needed to. They had brought the truth with them, in every step, every breath, every camera lens fixed upon them. A moment later, Darius stepped forward again. He turned to face the crowd and the wall of national press cameras now trained on him. 7 days ago, he said, they kicked in our door. They silenced my wife. He paused, then added, but today, we opened theirs. And we're not done. The live stream count ticked past 300,000 live viewers. The truth was no longer a private burden. It was a public reckoning. And the storm wasn't coming anymore. It was already here. The Monday after the silent march, something shifted. Not in the halls of power, not yet, but in the people watching. Thousands of messages flooded in. Nurses in Oregon, veterans in Ohio, a 13-year-old coder in Atlanta who added a live data counter to Maya's website. TikTok clips of the silent march had racked up 2.1 million views in 48 hours, stitched with captions like, "This is what justice in motion looks like." She was shot making breakfast. He's building the case with their own lies. Darius Robinson's inbox was full. Some offers of legal help, some of threats, but many just said, "How can I help?" He knew the next phase required public clarity, not just outrage. So he called a press conference, but not the kind they were used to. Tuesday morning, Eastwood Community Center. No podium, no slick audio, just a fold-out table, a battered laptop, a makeshift projector, and for stacks of printed documents labeled warrant, timeline, body cam transcripts, drone footage, metadata, civilian witness testimony. Room filled fast. Journalists from CNN, Vice, ProPublica, but also truck drivers, lunch ladies, and high school students. Darius stood at the front. His voice was calm, level like a teacher, not an accuser. "This is not a press conference," he began. "This is a deposition of the people." He clicked the laptop. The projector lit up. Exhibit A. Entry time, 12:03 a.m. Exhibit B. Warrant. Timestamp, 3:21 a.m. And then he played the 911 call. His voice on the recording was trembling, describing the quiet morning, the pancakes, the coffee. The moment Lena screamed. Next, body cam footage, officers breaching, flashbangs, muffled orders. One officer shouting gun. He froze the frame. Zoomed in, no gun visible. Timestamp, 12:04 a.m. Then, Exhibit C, metadata logs from officer Grant's GoPro. Frame-by-frame reconstruction showed a firearm appearing in the shot after Lena was down. A murmur rippled through the room. But Darius wasn't done. A retired IT engineer named Carlos stood to speak. I reviewed the frame rates. That's a 10-second loop splice. I'll stake my clearance on it. Applause broke out. Then Alana stepped forward. We spoke with 2 Dorn strategic whistleblowers. They confirmed this gun is part of their training kits, non-lethal, never registered, not even meant to fire. She held up a replica. This was planted. It's plastic. Weighted, but fake. Gasps, a grandmother in the back muttered. They tried to stage it like a damn movie, and still, Darius clicked forward. Exhibit D, call logs from DA Bristow to Silas Dorn. 12 calls. 2 minutes before the warrant timestamp. Then he showed Lena's medical records, entry wound trajectory from below. She was standing at the stove. She never turned around, Darius said. The officer never gave a warning. He opened fire through the side window, through our kitchen blinds. The silence was crushing. Then came the twist no one expected. Darius turned to a final page. A transcript, a radio dispatch from Eastwood PD, timestamped 11:58 p.m. the night of the raid. A voice said, Dorn units in position. We'll clear the southeast flank, neutralize resistance, and stage evidence if needed. Local DAs aware. He looked up. This isn't just bad policing, he said. This was a business plan. People stood, some in disbelief, some in fury. A local teacher wept openly. A veteran saluted Lena's name. And from the doorway, Pastor Elijah spoke. If you're wondering what justice looks like, it looks like this. Receipts. Truth, light, within an hour. Hashtags trended nationwide. Hashtag people deposition. Hashtag she was making breakfast. Hashtag DORNE leaks by noon. The mayor of Eastwood was on TV saying an internal review was underway. By nightfall, 3 local city council members had resigned, and Darius Robinson's website had crashed, overloaded with downloads of the deposition packets. He sat at Lena's bedside that night. She was still recovering, eyes closed. He whispered, we're not there yet, but they're running now. Lena's lips curled into the faintest smile. 10 days after Lena Robinson was shot, Eastwood woke up to barricades. City Hall, police headquarters, the Dorn Strategic Facility, all of them cordoned off, guarded, swarmed by press and protesters alike. But this wasn't chaos. This was containment. The state had stepped in. The Department of Justice had officially launched a federal investigation, citing strong evidence of fabrication, constitutional violations, and potential RICO elements. The name RICO was what made the room go quiet on CNN. Racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. The kind of law used to take down mafias, not law firms. Back in Eastwood, Lena was finally home. The bullet had torn through her lower back, missed her spine by less than half an inch. She moved slowly now, aided by a walker, but every step she took toward her kitchen felt like a rebuke to the people who had tried to erase her. Darius had moved the coffee machine closer. Maya painted a mural on the far wall, a hummingbird mid-flight, breaking through a wall of wire. On their front door, a new plaque read, "Truth lives here." The people weren't waiting for the courts. Alana Nguyen and her team had taken Darius's deposition and compiled it into a 100-page public report titled, "The Day They Shot the Truth." Within 24 hours, New York Times, The Atlantic, and The Guardian ran excerpts. The report ended with a single line, "Let this be the last time a black woman is shot while making breakfast, and the world believes she did something to deserve it." But the most dramatic turn came not from reporters, but from a janitor. An anonymous whistleblower, later revealed to be Kevin Dawes, a maintenance staffer at Dorn Strategic, leaked internal video of a meeting from 3 weeks prior to the raid. In the clip, Silas Dorn stands in front of a whiteboard. "We need a clean hit. The Robinson property is perfect. Minor priors, plenty of community ties. Make it messy, then offer settlement. They won't fight back, someone off camera asks, and if they do, Dorn replies, laughing, we'll smear M. Use the playbook. That same day, the Robinson family's legal team filed a federal lawsuit not just against Eastwood PD, but against Dorn Strategic. DA Bristow and several state officials dot the charges: conspiracy to violate civil rights, tampering with evidence, and lawful use of force, fraudulent warrant issuance, pattern of abuse under color of laund. Then came the moment no one saw coming. 3 weeks after the march, the Eastwood County Grand Jury was convened. Most people expected a quiet decline, a slap on the wrist, maybe a firing. Instead, they handed down 14 indictments. Officer Daniel Kerr was charged with attempted murder, tampering with evidence, and perjury. DA Colin Bristow was charged with obstruction of justice and civil rights violations. Silas Dorn was charged with racketeering and fraud. The verdict from the people had come before the courts, and Lena, she stood slowly, painfully on the steps of the same city hall where her husband once stood alone. This time, she spoke. Her voice was raspy but clear. I was not a suspect. I was not armed. I was making breakfast. She paused. I don't want revenge. I want reconstruction. Behind her stood Maya, holding up a new sign, Day Zero. The truth walks free. That night, a news anchor on national TV closed with, this wasn't just justice for one family. It was an exposure of a system that counted on silence. As fall rolled in, and the trees of Eastwood turned gold and red, the Robinson home became a quiet symbol of resilience. Kids biked past slower. Adults nodded in respect. Activists took selfies in front of the mural. And every Saturday, Lena sat at her kitchen table, pouring coffee, hummingbird brooch pinned to her chest, smiling gently when Darius leaned over and kissed her forehead. They had tried to end her story with a bullet. Instead, they started a movement. One not defined by anger, but by clarity, by receipts, by truth they couldn't bury. And in Eastwood, justice didn't knock politely. It walked right through the front door.